Good evening. All right, I like that. Only a few people, but people are speaking up. I like that. Now, it would be great if people in the back kind of just come up, just create a family. This first section, we want to build that up first. We know how the African people of the world are. They come a little late sometime or whatever, but we are committed to starting on time. We're already 5 minutes late or 10 minutes late. We're being live streamed, so we don't want our live stream audience to have to wait for our in-person audience to arrive. We know that people will be trickling in, and that's a good thing. My name is Dr. Ron Daniels. I'm president of the Institute of the Black World 21st Century. I also am privileged to serve as the convener of the National African American Reparations Commission and the co-convener of the Global Circle for Reparations and Healing. And we welcome you to this town hall meeting. A critical fact, people should be running to this town hall meeting. I mean, given the nature of what we are witnessing that we're going to be talking about this evening. We're approaching the first 100 days of one of the most consequential administrations in the history of these United States of America. We have assembled a very powerful panel. We have a discussion, a report card on the first 100 days of the Trump administration, but also to talk about strategies for resistance and transformation as well, because we don't just want to talk about what the issues are, we also want to talk about the way forward. And we hope to also, during the course of the conversation, open up the mic up front here for short interventions on the part of our audience as well. So we hope you will hang in there with us and participate in the proceedings. And I now want to welcome to this great house for our invocation, Reverend Bowen. I want to make sure I get his first, Reverend Thomas L. Bowen, who will give our invocation.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Allow me before we call upon God to formally and officially welcome you to the Shiloh Baptist Church, founded in the 1860s. And they tell you it's history. Because there's some who just want to know that. So I'm just telling you history while it's still here at Shiloh, which will always do. We welcome you to this home. God's house. Let us pray. Eternal sovereign God, in times like these, we call upon your name. The name of knowledge, slavery, and through freedom's unfinished fight. The name that has steady, trembling hands and ballot boxes, fortified, weary feet marching in the streets. A name that still promises justice, even when injustice seems to reign. We gather tonight, not in fear, but in faith. Faith that the ark still bends. Faith that the stones rejected by the builders will yet become the cornerstones. Faith that the cries of the oppressed that James Cong talked about are never lost in the heavens. But we ask you bless Brother Daniels, for he is on the wall in season and out of season. On the wall with Democrats in the White House, and on the wall with Republicans in the White House. We thank you for his strength and for his leadership. Bless every speaker, every listener, every organizer, and every courageous soul who dares believe that resistance and flipping the tables are holy and transformation is possible. Open our ears to truth. Open our hearts to conviction. Open our hands to the work that must be done. And remind us that power without purpose is terrible. But power in the service of love and justice is your will made manifest. Be with us now. Mighty and marvelous name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
All right. Would you now all rise for the Black National Anthem? I will insert the gospel choir, and we can chime in. One, two, three. I'm saying I need it, but I think so.
I'll take it.
So, you get the sound and some reverberation. Sort of rented here because we're getting a lot of feedback that something is happening here.
Oh. Who moved the speaker?
Okay, so next,
Who moved the speaker?
we have to take the, probably their name is Nancy right there. While we're waiting to do that, while we're waiting for the sound, here, I'd like to have Keller approach the rostrum and his wife, daughter, would you please join us as well?
Microphone that's on the stage, relay with the.
So we,
I turned it off.
in the Institute of the Black World 21st Century, we like to honor people for service, dedicated service. And the person we're honoring now. Dedicated service. Anyway, oh, that's great. All right. Thanks, brother. So, Ron Hampton, I would like for you to say a few words about this distinguished gentleman. You worked with him for many, many years.
Yeah, first of all, let me say good evening to everyone and welcome you all to the Institute of the Black World 21st Century review of Orange Man's 100 Days. But I'm here, Dr. Daniels gave me a few minutes to say something about this brother. Let me tell you, I remember working, at the time I was executive director of the National Black Police Association here in Washington, D.C. in the police department. And I used to get these phone calls when this brother was calling up asking me all the technical questions and about what's going on. He was also returning about citizen review and all those kind of things. And I'm saying to myself, who is this brother? And then when I found out that he worked for the great John Conyers, then I knew exactly who this brother was and what they were doing. Because this guy, Congressman Conyers, when he was there, you talking about somebody doing some good work and doing some lands, doing some anti-police stuff and some reform. But it was all Keenan back there in the background, head of the committee and the tech, which is a good thing because, the congressman was busy, but Keenan was back there running, getting it done, and really spending time. We used to spend the time talking about it and all those things. And I also remember with great affection the times that I've served on those panels at the Congressional Black Caucus, thanks to Keenan and their group. And then I had a chance to meet his wife. And matter of fact, we even sent, we was hoping that she would get a judgeship, and we even sent several letters wanting that to happen. But one of the things that, I'm closing up, because I feel the look on my shoulder, Tyrone. One of the things that really was is that this guy worked really hard and behind the scenes and was really on time and thorough when it came to working and doing the work that we were doing in terms of addressing police reform, addressing brutality across the board, and really doing the kind of work that we were doing. He made all the difference in the work to get it done. I want to thank him. Matter of fact, we just had coffee a couple of weeks ago. We had coffee, had a chance to sit down and talk about some of this stuff. But it brought back good memories. And just congratulations. It's well deserved.
Well, it's much more than that, too. We are on the verge of doing what I would have never thought would happen in my lifetime. And that is to achieve reparations at the federal level and all across this country. That is in no small measure due to the work of Congressman John Conyers. But it would not have been possible were it not for Keenan. Keenan Keller has been the custodian, working behind the scenes. He knows he's oriented and mentored many, many staffers to have them understand how to make the system work in our behalf, which is something we're going to have some intergenerational conversations with, because some people think you just wave a magic wand and the revolution will actually be televised. Well, it doesn't quite work that way. So HR 40 was on the brink. We were about to get it as an executive order under Biden. It didn't happen, but we're very, very, very close. But as our dear beloved sister Nkechi Taib was saying, I like to quote her all the time, reparations in this nation is on fire. All over the world, reparations is on fire. It is definitely possible, and again, in no small measure because of the work of Keenan Keller. So in the legacy of the Institute of the Black World 21st Century, the custom that we have, we present legacy awards. And we always make sure that they are tailored to the person. So this one reads, Legacy Award presented to Keenan Keller. Your decades of dedicated service as an advisor to Congressman John Conyers custodian of HR 40, chief counsel of the House Judiciary Committee, and strategist for progressive policy. That's who you are.
I want to thank Ron for all of those great words, and thank Ron for all of those great words. It was an honor to work on the Hill for Representative Connors, an honor to work on the Hill for Representative Jackson Lee. We were able to accomplish so many things because of their steadfast dedication and the fact that they had a complete North Star. They were never in the wind. They never wavered and never had to worry about what they thought and what they were going to do. They represented their districts, but they were members at large. And they were a large presence on the Hill, and we missed them. We actually have a hole in our representation as a result of the fact that they're not there anymore. While I'm not on the Hill now, I'm not going to leave the fight. You know, we always used to say that the struggle continues. With what's gone on in the last 100 days, saying that we're in a struggle just seems to not capture what's going on. We're in a war where they want to roll back the advances that so many people in this room and beyond have worked on. When you spend 25 years working on, for example, police accountability, and it's wiped out by the stroke of a pen. Oh my God. Oh no. That'll fire you up. And you're going to hear more about this from our panelists this evening. So I hope that everyone is ready for when the spark occurs, because something's going to happen. Something's going to happen. I don't know where, I don't know when, but we all need to be ready for when that happens so that we can actually take back our government. MAGA thinks that this is their America? No, this is my America. This is your America. It was built with the free labor, the sweat, the blood, and the tears of our people. They'll never take our country. They'll never take it. And we start now. Thank you so much.
This is the greatest photographer of all time. I'm just trying to got a camera. Get on here. Give it up, Keenan Keller.
Next, we want to present an award to Congressman Al Green, and so he has been kind enough to send a staffer, Jaliana Douglas, to receive the award. And the reason why we wanted to take the opportunity to do this is because what we face in the Congress of the United States, I have written, is profiles in cowardice. What Congressman Al Green has consistently done over the years, particularly when we had this joint session of the Congress of the United States. He was determined to let the world know that he was going to speak truth to power on our behalf. And he was scorned by some. In fact, there were people who even censored. Imagine censoring somebody from just expressing their voice. We know that under President Obama, he was defiled and people insulted him and did all kinds of things. So we said, we have a duty as a people when these kind of things to occur to acknowledge and to say to our leaders, we thank you for standing up. So we determined in IBW to present a profile and courage award to Congressman Al Green. So let me grab it and read it. This is the Profile and Courage Award presented to Congressman Al Green. for your fierce dedication to fearlessly speaking truth to power and to advance and protect a progressive policy agenda for Black people and the nation.
The congressman sends his apologies that he couldn't be on tonight, but he is absolutely grateful for all the work that the IBW is doing, and so I just want to say thank you for the award.
Microphone, so that helps us a little bit. So now is our person for our inspirational expression here? Has she gotten here yet?
Yeah.
Sister Peters, is she here?
Yes.
Okay, all right. One of our young artists who we have been working with the Institute of the Black World 21st Century. And let me suggest to you that one of the things we're attempting to do is to develop somewhat of a base here in DC. And also work with some young people like our Sister Peters in order to bring that about. So be so kind, would you please welcome Azura Peters for Inspirational.
Thank you, everybody. Good evening. My name is Azira, the poet, and I wrote a part 2 expression of my thoughts. It is called District of Collapse. They call it Chocolate City, but the flavor fades. Gentrification sweeps through like a tidal wave. History buried beneath glass and steel, while the mayor signs deals that people can't feel. I said, history buried beneath glass and steel, while the mayor signs deals that the people can't feel. She talks about progress, cameras flashing. Meanwhile, the homeless sleep on the streets of ashes. Mothers cry where schools once stood, replaced by condos they can't afford in neighborhoods they should. Go-go still beats, but the heart is sore. Black-owned businesses locked out of their own front door. They rename streets, but erase the past. Dollars over dignity, moving too fast. Children go missing in systems of blame. CPS plays a political game. Justice, a word that lost its weight. Courthouses filled with the cycles of fate. People march, the people plead, but promises break like a forgotten creed. Bulldozers hum, but voices scream, yet the mayor still smiles on the TV screen. DC ain't just monuments, suits, and lies. It's the elders, the youth, fire in our eyes. We built this city, brick by brick. They treat us like problems they can't just fix. So when the history books rewrite this place, will they mention the struggle, the stolen grace, or just the deeds, the handshakes, the wealth, while the real DC fights for its health? The soul of the city ain't up for sale, and now no mayor's throne can silence the webs. The people, remember, the people rise. DC's heartbeat will never die. I said, DC's heartbeat will never die. They paved our pain in marble halls while mothers scream through courtroom walls. Tears baptize these government floors. But justice never knocks on Black's doors. They feed us scraps, then call it grace. Smile in our face while they erase our space. Section 8 turned 8, then vanished overnight. And babies learn survival before they read or write. Hospitals close, but prisons expand, and every corner boy's got blood on his hands. Not for war, not from overseas, but from watching his brothers fall in these DC streets. Pain ain't poetic when it's lived and bled. When the rent's too high and our hope feels dead. When the mayor puts pride but against the poor. Locking us out while she opens more and more developers' doors. Resistance grows in the crops of despair, and the free food lines, and Auntie's prayer, and the murals, the marches, the midnight plans, and the youth who build with their trembling hands. We are the protests, the poem, the prayer. We are the ones who refuse to not care. The system may plot, may lie, may twist, but we are the proof that we still exist. So write this down in the city song. We were broke, bruised, but never gone. Through struggle and pain, we learn to insist. DC rises through the people who resist. Thank you.
Well, thank you very, very much. And that sets the stage for our discussion for this evening. And I want to also thank all of those who have joined us on live stream for this discussion. And I know you'll be hopefully chatting and commenting and whatever. Very important discussion. And we appreciate all of those who come out. We want to give a special thanks, a shout out to WPFW for running the PSAs and sharing their, celebrating their anniversary this evening. We're here, but we certainly want to hold WPFW for having supported us, as well as the Washington Informer as well has been very supportive of the work that we're doing. So now we want to, and we want, I've already warned our panelists, we want to be as crisp as possible. We're going to have a couple of round of questions and whatnot. We want to be as succinct as we possibly can, but also as insightful. We wanted to tee up the discussion with Dr. Julianne Malvo. Dr. Julianne Malvo, well, let me just introduce all the panelists and they can wave their hands. Dr. Julianne Malvo is Black Americans and one of the leading political economists in America today, and she's president of Americans and College for Women, Dr. Julianne Malvo. We also clap for her. We want to have this great church, Reverend Thomas L. Bowen, former senior White House advisor for faith engagement under the Biden-Harris administration. We have a lot of work with President Mark Morial, and he is, and I am delighted, because she's also been working with us on matters related to Haiti. So we've been getting to know each other quite well. Tara Murray, Esquire, Executive Director of the Washington Bureau of National Urban League, is on the panel. I call him the Godfather because the Washington Bureau of the NAACP, which he used to head, but he was there for many, many years. But we know that the NAACP has been kind of the custodian of sort of congressional policy for many, many years. And I call him the Godfather for that reason. You see that beautiful gray hair and all that good stuff. I'm the Senior Vice President for Governance and Policy for the NAACP, one Hillary Shelton. So I'd like to be connected with this brother. I have known him for quite a while because I'm ancient. I've been around a while. I remember from the days of the National Action Network in New York with Reverend Sharp that had been going on. You have devoted your life really to economic policy, whether it's in Boston and various other places, the Institute for Policy Studies and whatever. And I was delighted to hear that Dietrich Asante-Muhammad is now the president of the Joint Center for Political and Economic Studies. Dr. I call him our Secretary of State. He resists the title because he's modest and calm and that kind of stuff. But don't take him seriously. He is our Secretary of State. He is the founder and CEO of the Constituency for Africa and has been the guardian of policy related to aid for Africa for many, many years. Would you please welcome Mel Foote? came from those families that refuse to sit down. It's been in the struggle so many years. We have Denise Roy Barnes, who is the editor and publisher of the Washington Informant. City Informant everywhere, you know, because she's there sharing that information with the rest of my colleagues. Also joining us is the founder and director of the National Black Cultural Information Trust. My omission, I left one word out. If you don't know her, you should get to know her. She is a very, very powerful sister. She also serves on the National African American Reparations Commission. We call her Jan, Jessica Ann Richard. Did you get her? Well, last but not least, the revolutionary black man.
Yes, sir.
You hear his message. He's talking about Martin Luther King's revolution of values and all those things. He ran for Congress, and you know, he knows that at some point he may actually win. That's right. I believe in the president. We believe it. You can please welcome Keenan Freeman, co-founder of the so let's start the conversation about Malvo. We wanted you to tee it up because these are really, this is a very serious moment. I don't want to just overstress that, but I think we kind of get that feel. So so for me, you know, we have a powerful panel. We have people gathered here. We have people who are viewing here. And one of the things that we have attempted to do with the Student of Black 21st Century is do these kinds of meetings with a broad cross-section of voices in order to contribute to the conversation. And I know that as a leading political economist, you have, and looking at this stuff, you probably have been like aghast and all of that. But tell us, give us a sense of the impact of, what is that thing, the Office of Government, what that, the chainsaw, the Elon Musk chainsaw massacre. And that kind of thing. So, and its impact particularly on the safety net, because very often it is the least of us, the marginalized, who sometimes feel that this political system doesn't work, it doesn't matter, it's in power and all those things. And that's a part of what we have to do, is get people to understand that there are differences. And so take it away.
If you should suffer, I would like to ask second. Silence. Like there's Honorable Alexis Hurd. To serve as the Secretary of Labor. She was a consultant and postgraduate, so many others. Anyway, hopefully y'all heard me when I said we just want to take a moment to recognize the Honorable Alexis Herman. I met her when I was an undergrad actually and have known her forever. And it's just very sad at her passing, but she left an example for us, especially for Black women, about how we can make a difference, how we can deal with public policy. And she wasn't loud or raucous, and many times she upgraded me for salty language, or other things. But she didn't use salty language. She was a quiet, powerful presence. And so I just want to recognize her. This would be the kind of event, she probably wouldn't come, but she probably would watch the live stream. We'll miss her. So on the 30th, it will be 100 days of chaos. That's what we've been experiencing economically. It's pure chaos. That's the only thing you can call it. There are those on the right who are celebrating, but many on the right and the left, because Doge has gone through like the chainsaw. Cutting federal employment. The goal of this president is to cut federal employment by at least 20%. Now, this is not just Washington. We're here in Washington, so we did Washington, it's all over the country. And the cuts are not, many people think, okay, they're government employees, they make good money. They're the secretaries, they're the security guards, they're the folks who are making 15, 20 an hour. They're not doing so well. And all of this chaos is hitting them hard. People don't know what to do. Nobody does. Even talking to Fortune 500, Bloomberg had some of these Fortune 500 fellows on, they don't know what to do. The challenge with chaos is that people like to plan. So when you're talking about economic decisions, people don't want to know the tariff is here, the tariff is gone, maybe it'll come back. That's chaos. If you're planning 6 months in advance to put orders in, you don't know whether you're gonna put the orders in or not. Some people are on the fence about whether or not they're gonna buy a car because of the tariffs, what that's gonna do to automobiles. Even an air conditioner, some of it is assembled in China with 145% tariff. That means double plus the price that you would pay a while ago. So what we have to think about is the chaos that this administration has ushered in. And they still, and they don't know what they're doing. Let's just make it plain. I mean, they do not know what they're doing. They don't have a game plan. Read through Project 2025, you find some things, but no game plan. So how are you gonna implement these things? They have no clue, and they're not trying to help. The Reagan question that he raised in 1980, when he ran against Jimmy Carter, was, are you better off? And that's a question that many candidates have used to measure where we are. So that's the first question I would ask y'all. Are you better off than you were 3 months ago? For most people, the answer is no, because you don't know. Or people have been laid off, or people have been given this Faustian bargain of, well, you can quit and then we'll give you some money. But since the money is not allocated, are you really gonna get the money? In addition to the fact that all these layoffs are going to cost us billions of dollars. Because some people, their unions are not, AFG, American Federation of Government Employees, they're not rolling over. They are they're going to court, and you see all the people going to court. That's a good thing to protect our rights. But what does that mean to you? And then we have a government brain drain. So you have people who have their jobs for 30 years, who know what they're doing. And their basic attitude is, I'm about it here. I'm about it here, because they're at retirement age. They hang up for another 3-4 years, and they need to. But the whole notion of government service has basically been eroded. In a survey of Fortune 500 leaders, more than half fear a recession. Recession fears are at their 1990 level. People are saying, people just accept the fact that a recession is inevitable. Consumer confidence, I'm not laughing, I'm just, when I look at some of these numbers, I'm like, oh, it's a good thing that nobody lives with me, because then they would commit me. Because I make all kind of noises and sounds, I'm like, no, they didn't, I don't believe that, with a little profanity going in too. But consumer confidence is at its fourth lowest level since 1952. I.e., since before I was born. Consumer confidence is at the toilet, because people don't know. But what's the challenge with that? When consumer confidence is low, so is spending. And our gross domestic product is a function of spending. Our economy is driven between, and he'll correct me if I'm wrong, Derek and Ronald, but between 2/3 and 3/4 of our economy is based on government spending. The number goes up and down. So if we don't spend, the economy tanks. However, Black people, I'm telling you now, don't spend. But for 3 reasons. Number one, you ain't got no money. So if you ain't got no money, don't spend no money. Number two, this hurts us harder than it hurts others. People who have incomes below 60 grand are hurt more by these recession fears than people who make more than 60 grand. Median income for Black folks still have not hit 60 grand. So keep your money in your pocket and let it fall where it may. I've been respecting a couple people, including my friend Keenan. I'm so proud of him and happy that he got this award. In respect for them, I think the only time I ever stopped cussing was when you had me testifying. Unfortunately, I just think cussing is English. But in any case, in respect to him, whenever you see me nod my head, it's like an edit. It's like I was going to say it, but I didn't. So people don't know though whether to stock up or wait. Now let's talk about the yo-yo tariffs. They're really important. But I call them yo-yo tariff. First, he's gonna tariff everybody. Then he says, no, 10% across the board, extra. And everybody is off the hook but China. Now, he initially was gonna even tax this place, but they don't have anything but penguins. So he's gonna tax the penguins, give you a break. But the yo-yo, a tariff is a tax. Don't get it twisted. It is a tax. And it hits the people at the bottom hardest. Imagine 10% across the board. And you know, our working class folks, I don't go to Target. But people who are saving money go to Target. But praise Jamal, right, for the Target boycott. But if you're a single mom and you got 4 kids, you up in Target. Because first of all, little children go outgrow their clothes anyway, so they don't have to go to Saks. But secondly, you need cheap stuff, so you go to Target. So all that, the Target, Walmart, those places are gonna be hit very hard because much of their stock comes from China. A tariff, let me repeat again, is a tax. Now, Mexico and Canada are our largest trading partners, our neighbors. And we're going off of our neighbors. Doc, I know you I have 10 minutes here, but I'm. Okay, but I'm running quickly through all of this. So the taxes on them are acts of war on our neighbors. And what does that mean in terms of stability? The unemployment rate is about what it was. The last rate we got in April was for March. It's about what it was the previous month, but it's likely to go up because we're going to begin to absorb federal layoffs. Inflation again is about where it was, but everything this man does is inflationary. Crackdowns on immigration is inflationary. Because I know none of y'all are going to be picking less. I know that. I know I'm not. I know our young people are not going to do that. All those products that are made in California, anyway, it's inflationary. Cracking on immigration is inflationary. And now this fool, yes, I said fool, he has issued more than 100 executive orders. Only about 10% of them have anything to do with the economy. Remember this guy said, as soon as I come in, prices are going to go down. They have not. As soon as I come in, we're going to do, what he has used is anti-Semitism and his own ignorance as a cudgel in higher education, other places, to issue executive orders that have nothing to do with the economy and frankly, nothing to do with anything else. So the anti-DEI thing, it's our people. I have an estimate a couple of years ago that about 50% of the DEI jobs were held by Black women. So sisters are going to get clapped real hard. So when we look at this economy, all we can expect is chaos. When we look at these executive orders, all we will see is chaos. And the chaos that we experience levels inserts a level of uncertainty into the economy, which means people don't know which way is up. And we don't know which way is up. We basically have confusion.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jaliana. So, Murray, the National Urban League, the power of the Urban League, every year, state of Black Americans. The reason why I say that is because I'm a believer in names. Power of the Urban League. So I'm wondering, I know y'all are practicing and meeting, trying to figure out what is going on. So from the perspective of the Urban League, how do you see the impact of these first 100 days?
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Jenkins. Thank Dr. Malo for uplifting the loss, the tremendous loss of Secretary Hurley, who was the vice chair of our board. So it's been a hard day for us today with the tremendous loss. Thank you for the invitation to be here and to esteemed panel here. At the National Urban League, we have really assessed the first 100 days of the Trump administration as nothing short of a national crisis. It's something that is a direct threat to Black progress. So from day one, we have seen this administration launch a full-scale assault on civil rights, on civil liberties, on economic justice, and on the very idea of a multiracial democracy. President Trump has used the full power of the federal government not to serve the people, but to target and go after his critics, after anyone who would dissent, and to roll back, as Keenan, Keller shared, roll back decades of progress. And so, we've been looking at this and, we've seen the closing of offices of civil rights across the entire administration. So every federal agency, the Office of Civil Rights has been closed by this administration over the 100 days, almost 100 days. We've seen the targeting of universities, of law firms, former presidents, and of our museum, okay? And we've also seen, the kidnapping, right, of people off of the streets, not charged with any crime, but kidnapped and shipped off to other countries to be held, really echoing the darkest moments of our history. And so we are deeply concerned at the National Urban League. Just this past week, the president issued executive orders that would, eliminate disparate impact, which has been a tremendous tool to addressing discrimination. An executive order just 2 days ago that, would completely reverse guidance as it relates to school discipline that impacts predominantly our children, Black children. Has uplifted orders about, workforce, but, has made zero mention of equity, which we know, effectively completely sidelines Black workers. We've seen the mass layoffs that we've talked about, the mass firings. We've seen the federal funding freezes that have, impacted people's ability to pay the rent, to put food on the table, and to provide critical health care for their families. And we've also seen a $9.6 trillion market crash. So, it has been a remarkable, chaotic, but truly a crisis moment that we are in. I likened it to someone, for the past 70 plus years, we've been building. There's been scaffolding and we're building, and now that building is on fire. And we're still trying to build, but we're also firefighting at the same time. So that's the moment that we are in. The National Urban League has, met this moment by, thinking strategically how we can work collaboratively with many people across this panel to meet this moment. And in January, just 2 days after the inauguration, we launched the Demand Diversity Roundtable, in the backyard of the White House at the National Press Club, where we came together with over 20 civil and human rights leaders and human rights defenders that represent over 100 million Americans, to say that we are not just going to accept this silently. We're going to push back on the attempts to erase us and to hold us back and to hold us down. Just last month, we announced our Fair Budget Coalition, which we are doing in partnership with, again, people on this panel looking at Dr. Deidre Asante-Muhammad, but think tanks and with labor unions and other civil rights leaders to really develop and to engage Congress on what a fair and just budget looks like. And so, we've launched a number of campaigns. We've launched a Fight the Freeze campaign. We've launched campaigns to save the MBDA, because another thing that this administration has done is close the Minority Business Development Agency, completely gutted. There's only 3 members left at the Minority Business Development Agency. We know they're also attempting to close the Department of Education. And so we've been attempting to educate and to activate the public, and also our affiliate network. We have 92 affiliates across 36 states and here in the District of Columbia, and attempting to activate them and resource them so that they can lead at a local level. But I think what the final thing that I'll say is the last 100 days reflects not only the threat that we face, but also the power that we have. And we've really at the National Urban League been attempting to lean into that power to fight back and to fight for Black futures. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So there was some sort of staying in that same vein. In terms of the civil rights community that you're at the center of, because the NAACP has this phrase, the oldest, the biggest, the baddest, the most frightening, the most terrifying. I'm a lifetime member, so I can say that. I grew up as my first introduction to the civil rights movement was as a young NAACP leader, so I can say this. But how are you seeing the first 100 days in terms of and certainly Mr. Berry alluded to in terms of the civil rights community? I mean, particularly in terms of, you begin to take certain things for granted in terms of rights. We've seen a slow erosion. You and I were having a conversation about the Voting Rights Act. But this is a little bit like on steroids. So your thoughts.
Dr. Jan, first, thank you so much for inviting me down this here. I also want to thank you for the work that was given to Keenan and how great. Let me just say, these are two people that have fought for our issues for so long on Capitol Hill. I still remember when Keenan had that almost, well, I remember a while back, we worked together on so many issues. But let me also recognize someone else who's much work done on Capitol Hill throughout the years. So we're kind of trying to measure what's been going up to this point. Certainly, Lorraine Miller deserves a round of applause from all of us for the great work. So much else. You said she was the first African American to have that position. Let me also say, the way it benefited the civil rights community is we always in a place to get things done on Capitol Hill. And again, we're very grateful for your presence here tonight. As I'm again talking about what is happening, what we see is a strategy that this man has been consistent and actually implemented from the very beginning. From the time our president, and we have to claim, basically got to claim. In the time he became president, we saw him flying back and forth to his home bases throughout the country. There was not 1 week that passed, it's not outside of DC, and actually continuing to promote an agenda. It's been very difficult and challenging for all of us. Let me also say that as we went into this election, we went in with handicaps. You and I talked a little bit about the Voting Rights Act, that was one. In essence, we went in without the pre-clearance provisions being in place in the Voting Rights Act, something that we worked on for years before it passed and was very successful, making sure that our communities had access to the polls at the local, state, and federal level. And the work that ended up being able to be done at the international level has promoted those issues as well. So in essence, we went in with a handicap, making sure that every vote cast would be a vote counted. And in essence, we did not have that going in. But let me also say is that data came back, there was a lot of, we've got a lot of media here. Is there a better term than smudging the information that was being presented throughout the country? Because what we end up seeing is challenges with the information about who was voting, how they were voting. Every voting site being open and accessible to every American was clearly problematic as we went in. We saw as this went on, we found ourselves listening to technologists, and I love technologists, don't get me wrong. But when Mr. Musk comes to Washington and provides the kind of resources he did throughout the country, utilizing the technology to actually count the votes, and he's got these young, the ones that kind of bend the truth as we're looking at the information being presented to us, making sure the data is there. There you go. So as we went this, we knew we had those challenges, those problems. We also knew that we were going to have to make sure we maximize voter participation. So as we had this conversation, I don't want to in anything I say, just laying out the problems. The problems are there and they will drive all of us crazy. And again, what are their strategies to be successful? We're not engaging in the fight to make sure our democracy lives up to its promises. Indeed, making sure that every vote cast is a vote counted. Making sure that everyone is eligible to be able to vote is, quite frankly, our position, it should be automatically registered to vote. So they can cast those votes on election day. We're one of the few so-called free countries in the world in which you have to go through an affirmative process to be able to register to vote. If we were in Germany, that would not be an issue. If we were in France, that is not a concern. If we were in another other countries that consider ourselves first world, trying to move the issues forward, those issues are not on the table. So what is on the table? What's on the table is gun violence is the #1 killer of youth in our country, and African-American youth in particular. What's our problem? Our problem is we have no clear policies as we move forward on the in-racial profiling act and other issues to make sure that our law enforcement officials had not only the policies in place, but the training to be able to implement those things very well. That Ron Hampton knows because he's chaired so many committees for us to get those things done. As we're talking about the issue of making sure that everyone has an opportunity to live out the American dream and perhaps own a home to raise their family and be safe in the communities in which they live in, as we think about concerns along those lines as well, is a huge deal. Now, let me say this. I don't want anything I'm saying to be confused with the NAACP endorsing candidates or our political parties. We don't care what you call yourself. We don't care what your membership is. The bottom line for us is if we elect you, how are you going to vote and provide leadership to make sure that we get all the issues on the table? We're able to make sure our country lives up to its promises of equal protection and equal opportunity under law. So let me stop there and just say, we entered this with a handicap. We know what the challenges are, and we've got to continue to raise the issue along the way. As we've gotten into issues of the kind of things that got eliminated, the shock value in executive orders that would eliminate equal protection programs and policies across the board. When someone talks about issues like DEI, but never define the terms and tells you we just can't talk about issues that affect people of color, women, the LGBT community, or anyone else is not simply an American. But we know our experiences are that we've been able to call ourselves Americans for a very long time. But living out the real promise of being Americans is something that we're still fighting for.
All right. So very good, Muhammad. Let me again congratulate you on serving the power. It's definitely one. On our found Hey, so you're in a very, very critical position, and you, quite frankly, the Joint Center was kind of in a lull for a while, but you was getting great energy. I'm watching now the sports coming out almost every 15 minutes. You just started the executive staff, and I noticed you had a whole lot of women on that staff too. So you were dealing with Jim and all those good stuff. We trained you well. So you focus on policy formulation. I can already see the collaboration. We were in Atlanta together, the Association of Black Foundation Executives, and we saw a similar kind of collaboration. So again, from your perspective in terms of policy formulation, how do you assess the first 100 days and what are some of the challenges moving forward?
Great. We got one mic first. We'll leave that one. This is what, that's right, one mic. A little nods, okay. So I'll start off with, I just want to, the election that brought in the Trump administration, brought in a Republican Senate, a Republican Congress, is also the election that elected more Black senators than the country's ever seen. 5 Black senators. We've also at record level of Black representation as it relates to mayors, as it relates to representatives in the House of Representatives. I also just want to note that before Trump came in, I wrote a report with Dr. Algernon Austin for the Center of Economic Policy Research about the strongest Black economy and why it isn't enough.
in that we were close to record low levels of unemployment. Dr. Malcolm brought up, I think we're still around 6.1% unemployment, which is quite low. I think for 30 years, from 1970 to 2000, the average unemployment rate was around 11%. So it was significantly lower. Record levels of wealth, around median wealth 45,000. Record levels of income around 54,000. Now, I was on type of scholarship not too long ago, and I was saying just because we hit record levels doesn't mean that we were balling, right? It just means that we were not the least broke we've ever been in the history of the United States. But as someone who studied the racial wealth divide and racial economic inequality for so long, it is important to notice when we have moved some things forward. And I think this is also what makes what's occurring now so threatening, is that through chaotic, kind of shock and awe actions, we're really threatening a serious recession in which African Americans always suffer the worst and suffer the longest, right? It took 10, 15 years for African Americans to get the wealth they lost from the 2008 recession. And if we, for some people who are very wealthy, recession's a bump in the road. But for others, it can really be life-changing. And so, this is something we have to watch. Do want to know kind of how this first 100 days started of the position of African Americans. So, and I will note, and it's already been put forward, has been a time of maybe unprecedented attempt to strengthen executive power. Brian was mentioned already, the executive orders. There was 131 executive orders. No president has ever put that many executive orders in their first 100 days. The disruption of government to ensure, the complete capture of the Trump administration, of even the Republican Party. Oftentimes parties get elected, but there's all these divisions and you still have to make deals. Trump, really took over the Republican Party, had a Republican House, as I mentioned, a Republican Senate, a conservative Supreme Court, and and still did not find that enough and felt the need to, with executive orders, with trying to do things that hadn't been done before, taking over federal agencies, and so there's no kind of checks and balances even within federal agencies, and taking shots at any type of institution that might try to hold a president accountable, whether it's the media, whether it's higher education, whether it's lawyers. It's really been fascinating, this broad attack. But one thing that I don't think has been noted enough is also interesting to me, the complete lack of legislative victories in the first 100 days. It's been everything around executive order, what he can attempt to do just through his office, but hasn't been able to push forth substantial legislation, which is something to watch. And I do have a feeling, because it has been so chaotic that even his supporters, when you start messing with people's money, everyone gets concerned. If people are seeing, well, wait a minute, we wanted to make America great again, but not be broke again. And I think, that is, a concern. So I think we might be at the height of the shock and awe, or we just passed the height of the shock and awe. But the one thing legislatively coming up, and I think only a few things we're going to get past, and we really have to watch, is, as Urban League had mentioned, they're doing great coordination and organizing around the fair budget, but the budget and tax policies, which will really, if they're trying to, as they try to reinstate and kind of have a 2.0 on the Trump tax cuts, this can long-term, these executive orders, have some immediate effects, but if we change the tax code where the wealthy are paying less and are getting more and are really suffocating the programs that are essential for most Americans, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, funding for public education, that's a long-term change that will be very difficult for us to bounce back on. So I think we have to be really ready for not get blown away by the executive order shock at all. Get ready for the battle ahead of us, particularly as it relates to tax and finance policy. So.
Thank you very much. Yeah, that beautiful, they got that beautiful bill, right? That beautiful bill that's coming out, that beautiful big bill that's on its way down. Now, we have an insider, somebody who knows on the inside, our senior advisor for the faith engagement for the Biden administration, And I say that because of necessity. And by the way, I've talked to different people and they've raved about the way in which you provided briefings and helped them to navigate and get connected, because it's hard to deal with these bureaucracies sometimes. And I say that because I admit that, and Hillary, you and I were talking about this, the messaging was incredible in the sense that, and I will say this unapologetically, and will defend it. Joe Biden had the most progressive legislative agenda this side of LBJ, and it rivaled that of Franklin Delano Roosevelt. So it's interesting that he is now this thing, and this like everybody, he didn't, I mean, this thing is like, you know, you can't say it's like a child of God. It's like he was like some pariah or something. So I'm wondering whether you would just share not only your perspective on what the first 100 days, but contextualize that against what you witnessed and saw in terms of your tenure at the Biden administration, Reverend Bowen.
First of all, I just want to thank you. Some people call it a Keenan. I want to thank you, Dr. Daniels, for your work. I go back to 1984 and the first campaign of Jesse Jackson to Dr. Nalvo, who I always read the USA Today, to Hillary Shelton, the Dean of Legislative Affairs, talking about relations to Washington, D.C., who I encountered with Premier Ronald when I first came to D.C. My sister-in-law, Peaceful and Barnes, who hired me at one time to be her religion editor and help get me to start. Then there's a person whose voice always here in the back of my ear, and that is Cong. He's like saying anything. If I'm at the meeting, he's in the back of the room. I know it's time to get right. Because he'll put me to the side. But it's unimaginable where we are. And I think about some of the last days, particularly after the election, when the president said that we're going to run through the tape, and people began to talk about executive orders then. But we thought there were just some things you just did not do. There are a lot of executive order dates that I received on my desk, but there were some things that you just not do that had to be vetted in a certain way. And it's kind of peculiar, isn't it? That it took all these turning back legislation for us to realize what we had. That as much as you say we were good on messaging, there's some things that people are just saying, what? If you want to know what we've been able to achieve over the last decades, look at what's being turned back. Those were our achievements. When I say our, I mean yours. Anytime that the president signed legislation that people advocated on behalf, I call them and say, thank you. This is the work that you were able to do. You talk about those calls, and I had what I called a moral cabinet. And those were these leaders, organizations, National Council of Jewish Women, Bread for the World, Sojourners, Men of Faith Alliance, who I spoke with every week. And they were doing what Mary Ellman at Children's Defense Fund taught me. And that is that the budget is a moral document. So everything that we have with a dollar amount to it, they were making this is a moral battle, and they were advocating for that. Then it was my job to pass on that message to the president and to the administration in terms of what the faith community felt about a matter. And I must tell you, I didn't know going through the door just how much input one could have until there was a message about a piece of legislation. They wanted to know if it met a certain standard. And I thought the person over my office is the one that chimed in, and they called me on my phone saying, did you see the email? Are you okay with it? Then you can sign off on it. That's why I knew this thing was real. Well, let's get to grading Trump. I must warn you, I don't agree with her. I do not believe in social promotion. So what you get is what you get. And that is when it comes to a report card, 100 days in for Trump, sad to say, you have to give him an F. And F minus. And not just for political reasons. That's not why I'm sitting here. But for moral and civic reasons. Yes. In his first nearly 100 days, we see them deepen the wounds of division, target programs that lift up the vulnerable, demonize and criminalize the poor, attack the very idea of multiracial democracy. Instead of building trust, he's building walls, figurative and literally. And just what yesterday put together a group that is perhaps the most least diverse religious group you ever want to see, a full task with rooting out anti-Christian bias. When we know that in this country, to be Christian is operate from a point of privilege. We're not under attack in this country if you are Christian. But we know that it's just a way to say that anything that goes against what certain white Christians believe will be considered and interpreted as being anti-Christian bias. So instead of expanding freedom, he's been busy shrinking back the rights, whether it's voting rights, basic human rights, civil rights. And for faith communities, this administration has shown open hostility to the core principles that we hold sacred. Things like compassion for the stranger, care for the least of these, honesty in leadership, and justice. Because when it comes to a measuring stick for Christian faith in our nation, it should be how we treat the most vulnerable. It should be how we treat our neighbors. I often tell my parishioners, don't judge me by how many times I come to church on Sunday. Don't judge me about how much money I put in the collection plate. Judge me how I treat somebody. Because if I climb off that pulpit and then just mistreat people that I see, then what use is that religion? We have occupied pulpits with empty theology these days. But the Bible asks, what does the Lord require of you but to do justice, to love mercy, and walk humbly with your God? There has been no justice, no mercy, and definitely no humility. So yes, it's F minus, not just on policy, but on moral leadership. But as a preacher, I have hope. I believe that the people of faith and conscience will have the final word. Because every empire that stands against truth eventually fails. And every movement rooted in love and justice, I heard on last Sunday, will rise.
All right. All right, so to our Secretary of State, I'm almost afraid to ask the question. You've been the custodian of watching what's happening with our policy towards Africa. In fact, you have, with your colleagues, have able to people. And we have a formation called the Pan-African Unity Dialogue. We were privileged to have some limited participation in it. But you spent literally weeks, if not months, formulating a series of policy recommendations, as your organization has done effectively in the past, to submit to this administration. So I have to ask our Secretary of State, do you have any hope? I mean, what are we going to do under this administration? I mean, is there any optimism, is there any hope? Mel,
let me say first of all, on the international front, right now, there's no hope. So, I hate to say that. I've been bipartisan throughout my time in Washington. Jack Kemp was my vice chair till he died, Republican. Roscoe Moore was my chairman, Black Republican. Some of the best work that we've done on Africa has been supported by Republicans. George W. Bush probably was the best president we've ever had on Africa, believe it or not. You couldn't find Africa on a map, but he picked the right people to work in the offices. He committed to the right projects. No problem whatsoever. They need to build a big statue of George W. Bush. Let me say, I agree with Jaliana. It's been chaotic, totally disruptive, and confrontation when we talk about international affairs. First thing he did, he made the South African ambassador to Washington, Ibrahim Rasool, good guy. made him persona non grata because he didn't agree with the Gaza policy. And he didn't agree with some of these assertions of Elon Musk, another South African who wanted to bring the apartheid back and bring the white South Africans here as refugees. I mean, absolutely crazy stuff. He dismantled USAID. That hit me personally because my daughter is a foreign service officer for USAID in Jamaica, and she's losing her job. I mean, I had to go down next week just to make sure she's okay. But for no apparent reason whatsoever, you're throwing away USAID. The USAID is the best way for if the US want to do business in Africa. It's good that you can go there first and talk about the schools and the healthcare and other things. It makes you a friend going into the country. You'll throw that away. Now, how are you going to approach Africa on trade even? You handed China Africa. You handed Russia Africa, Turkey Africa. The US will have very limited engagement in Africa going forward. He's dismantled Prosper Africa, which was an initiative to promote US trade with Africa. Threw it away, just threw it away. He dismantled the African Development Foundation, which does really unique ways of helping Africa. He dismantled the US Institute of Peace. Everything that you would think of as good, he's in the process of cutting, and most of the embassies in Africa are going to be eliminated, So the question becomes one, how do we even engage with Africa? Now, we recall his first administration, he termed African countries, I can't say it because we're in the church. Amen? You can't say it. But the term he called African, I mean, you wouldn't even call somebody that in a bar, But this is what he thought about Africa for African people. So we see nothing but chaos. We see nothing but disruptions. He delayed appointing an assistant secretary for Africa. Now, I work with the policy. Like Ron indicated, we were putting together policy recommendations for the next administration. We did it for Obama. We did it for Biden. We did it for Bush. And we were preparing it. We have a whole category of people of African descent who come together and looking at trade, looking at healthcare, looking at all of these things and make the recommendations. I've already been in touch with some folks from the Trump side who are not Trump people, but they work on Africa. And they seek my opinion on some of this stuff. But it seems like a hopeless, I don't see any way we can communicate with this administration and really get them to go forward. We got the Bush administration to take on HIV/AIDS. We've got Clinton to do the Africa trade, the Growth and Opportunity Act, the trade bill, and we've gotten big things done out of Biden. Although he didn't do what I wanted him to do on a lot of cases, it's not 100% good or 100% bad, but you're pushing on both sides. But this case, he's also attacked the African immigrants as well as other immigrants here in this country. And he allowed his base basically to call Liberians eating your pets in your community and this kind of thing, and created chaos. So we see much more disruption. I'm talking always to the African immigrant population in the United States, and they're in total fear. They're in fear of going to work. They're in fear of going to the church. They're in fear of going to the store because they don't know where ICE is going to pop up at any given moment. And so it's not only about what we're doing in Africa, we're throwing away our opportunity. The only thing that Trump is trying to do in Africa right now is to get his hands on the gold, the lithium, and the minerals, strategic minerals in Africa. He got this guy out there who's Lebanese, Dutch Church, who's going around cutting deals. He's calling it a deal. You give us all your minerals and I'll make sure we can stop a war. And if you don't give me the minerals, I'll make sure you're going to have more war than you can imagine. What kind of relationships are we doing? He's also attacking the World Bank. He's attacking the United Nations. So it's not just about our bilateral relationships. It's also impacting on the global. I'm expecting that the Europeans are going to cut aid to Africa and spend more money on defense because Trump is saying that they have what they ought to do. You're going to find the Asians and others reducing their support for humanitarian support for Africa. The biggest group we got is every 4 years we have a famine. We have a pandemic. It's either Ebola, it's AIDS, You know, and we can expect next year, to have another famine. And if we had another famine or another pandemic, the thing about pandemics, it's not like you can combine it to Africa, you know? You can't say, you know, you don't have a passport or don't have a visa, you can't come in. To get a virus here, all it requires is an airplane ride. All it requires is a FedEx package, you know? So we as a people, despite all the things we can do to try to prevent the global pandemics, we turned our back to it, saying, oh, they over there, we don't have to worry about them. A lot of the Trump base say, let them die. You know, they think the world will be better if Black people are not here. So I don't want to paint a total disaster picture, but we think for the next year or so, it's going to be very, very bad on the international front.
All right, thank you very much. I'd like to ask you, because you deal with the issue of cultural information trust. That's an important name. It sort of speaks to the kind of work that you do. And we've heard diversity, equity, inclusion. We've heard museums. We've heard the whole thing about wokeness. They want to be asleep. They're afraid to be woke. Well, we know what woke means. Woke means that people want to be called by their right names. They want to be called respectfully. They want to get rid of all of this. I'm just wondering, what are you seeing in terms of the report card on this administration for its first 100 days, in terms of the work that you're doing that we ought to be optimistic about, no, but concerned about? You have the floor. No, I'm sorry, I'm Jessica, and then you're coming up next.
Sure.
I'm glad that was your question, thank you.
Sure, at the National Black Cultural Information Trust. Is this one working better? Okay, great. We started tracking the anti-DEI stuff about 2 or 3 years ago. And one of the things that is important for people to understand is that conservatives are very, 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 very good at public relations. They're very good at marketing and they're very good at communications. And what they do is often take terminology and use it to rally up their base. And then utilize the arguments with progressives as another tool for rallying up their base. It never really was about DEI, the terminology. It never really was about wokeness itself. It was about using the terms and this idea that we're getting something for nothing to rally up the base. Toni Morrison has a really excellent quote that speaks to this about the very serious function of racism, is that it gets you explaining yourself over and over and over again, distracting you from your work. And that is exactly what this is. So they will throw out DEI without ever breaking it down. Hillary was talking about this earlier in that. And what we'll do is say, well, no, diversity, equity, and inclusion is this, and woke means this. But they don't really care what it means. It doesn't matter if we reiterate it over and over again. It never really was about the fact. It was about being able to use it as a tool for engagement with their bases. So one of the things that we can do is, of course, when someone says DEI, actually just say diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility, and say, well, what's wrong with diversity? What's wrong with all of the other different terms? But even more than that, not to get bogged down itself in the terminology. And that's one of the things that we've done remarkably over the last over 400 years of being here on this land, is that we've been able to take our components from our culture and reinvent ourselves. We are constantly reinventing ourselves with many different tools of words, language, and terminology. And so instead of letting them pigeonhole us in this battle between DEI, wokeness, and so forth, we overwhelm them with our consistent flow of intercultural terminology that benefits our communities. I'll give you an example, or not necessarily overwhelm them, maybe slightly trick them. So, and I'll get into also the report card part of it in just a second, but one example. DC recently passed a reparations legislation. Okay, you know why that happened? Congress actually has to approve legislation that goes through DC, right? So then why would Republicans allow that to go through? Why would conservatives allow that to go through? We didn't use the word reparations. They were using keywords. They were using keywords to, like AI tools, to literally any page that has Black on it, any page that has culture on it, any page that has reparations, repair, DI, equity, inclusion, and they were pulling those down. You're not gonna use this, we're not gonna use this, we're not gonna use this. But all the other terms that actually do mean reparations, that actually speak to reparations, we use them. And then one conservative paper picked it up and was like, wait a minute, how the other day get through? And now they're rushing to try to figure out how to defund it or whatever. They never could imagine it, but that's just an example of our own imagination and our own cultural tools and mechanisms that we have to be able to advance forward without them really even realizing that that is what we're doing. Sometimes we talk too much. Because we're operating from this moral ground that everyone actually wants the same things, maybe they're just confused. They were never confused about it. They were never confused about woke. They knew what it meant. They just didn't want Black upward mobility. They just didn't want that. So this is what Trump did in the first 100 days. At least 3 executive orders banning DEI and wokeness, removing DEI from federal grants and programs, attacking universities that have so-called DEI initiatives, seeking to withhold federal funds from public schools that have diversity, equity, and inclusion. And again, instead of this battle over DEI itself, one of the tools that was used to get a federal judge to block that most recent executive order trying to prevent schools from getting funding if they have DEI is that this is against the First Amendment. This is a First Amendment issue. So we have to be able to look deeper into these conversations that we're having, because a lot of the times when we're getting pigeonholed into a certain terminology, it is meant to just engage in rage bait. And then we have to be able to speak to each other and speak over those terms and get to the root of the issue, which is you do not want Black Americans to succeed in this country. We can remove the words DEI and wokeness tomorrow and you would come up and replace it with something else. So what is the heart of the issue? The heart of the issue is you don't want us to advance. And whatever we need to do, whatever tools we need to use, that's what we need to continue to come up with. Different ways to navigate this system. First of all, challenge them head on so that we can get people to stop embracing this fear mongering and cowering and saying, we're going to go on the and remove. You're agreeing with fascism before it's even challenged. We have to stop doing that. We have to challenge it head on, challenge it on the root of the issue. The root of the issue is not diversity, equity, and inclusion. The root of the issue is people are trying to advance the society and they're coming up with multiple excuses as to why we should. Now let's challenge that in court and see how it goes.
All right. All right, we want to introduce our panel. I want to go to Asante-Muhammad even next. Asante-Muhammad, as an emerging political leader in the district, how do you view the impact of the administration's policies on DC's status in terms of home rule and the prospects for statehood? They're not exactly the same as you're aware, but so how are you viewing that? I know you've been pretty animated about some of these issues and the behavior of elected officials and so forth. So you have the floor.
I think that DC has become what Martin Luther King said about the Black church. The Black church has become a tail light instead of a headlight. Present company not included. So I think that, in my opinion, we are completely without any leadership of resistance in the city. With the fact that our mayor has completely capitulated, the fact that our beloved Congresswoman Ella Holmes-Norton is a complete non-factor. Just this month, April 17th, the Washingtonian magazine published an article entitled, "Does Illinois Still Have What It Takes to Fight for DC?" as the oldest member of Congress, I think that's a rhetorical question, but the real question is, did our mayor ever have what it takes to fight for this city? The reality is that when you look at the mayor of Chicago, who's giving off kind of fossil vibes, right? He called Trump a terrorist. He said, if you want to meet with me, come to Chicago. I'm gonna tell them what floor you're on and all that. Our mayor of Washington, D.C., when she was told to meet with Trump, she went to Florida. Why would a D.C. mayor go all the way to Florida to meet with the president of the United States? Of course, we all know he's transactional. So you're gonna give up something to get something. We don't know what it was, but it was a transaction. And the reality is, what was the first thing she did when she got back to DC? Black Lives Matter Plaza was dismantled. One of the few symbols of resistance in this city. And our own people, oh, that doesn't mean nothing. It didn't mean nothing to you, because you wasn't doing nothing to begin with. But people like me spilled blood there. Saw people get their eyes put out by rubber bullets. We was on the front line when Trump called his goons on him and held the Bible upside down. That's where we was at. And people from all around the world, how quickly we forget, came to see that sacred space of resistance all around the world. You remember she was cool? That was cool, right? The symbolism was beautiful. First thing to go. Second thing, whatever he wanted, clear out the tents, what happened? That's, again, kicking on the most vulnerable, right? Do you think for a second he told her, I don't like dogs. All these dog parts got to go. What do you think would happen with the average white man who had 81 times the wealth of the average black man would have done in response to the removal of dog parts in the nation's capital? All hell would break loose. So the reality is that the strategies for resisting the transformation, I don't think we're going to get that from our elected officials. That's going to have to come from the people. Because clearly, these ain't the ones. Now, the sister said earlier, she mentioned that, that the house is on fire. It reminded me of Perry Belafonte telling the story of his last conversation with Martin Luther King. He said that Martin Luther King had reservations about this whole integration, because he said that I had a dream had become a nightmare. This is a nightmare. And he said that he felt that he was having his people integrate into a burning house. So Mr. B was like, well, what do we do? He said, become fire, right? But these people are watching the fire in their neighbor's house, and instead of putting water on the fire, they put water on their house, thinking it was going to somehow protect them from it. That's what we got. I think that Political Magazine said it best, that Trump 1.0 was resistance. Trump 2.0 is acquiescence. And if we're going to allow the weaponization of federal funds to justify that capitulation, to justify us acquiescing, then that is really saying more about you and your agenda and what you are about, because apparently you wasn't listening when Martin Luther King said we need a radical revolution of values. What's important to you? And if we had resistance in the city, Trump would have been forced to send his own goons down there to dismantle Black Lives Matter Plaza. Trump would have to send his own goons to break up homeless encampments in this city. We would have heard someone say that DC residents pay more per capita in federal income tax than anyone else in this entire country. Therefore, if you are denying us access to our resources, then we will keep our tax money right here and become a real sanctuary city. And you will work this out. If we don't have statehood, we don't have self-determination and representation, then we'll keep our federal income taxes right here in our pockets. How about that? Whole different conversation. That would be a little kind of fossilized. I think that's above the head of our current leadership.
All right, okay. You got some nerve talking to all of us. That's an interesting piece, because that draw gets the point very, very clearly. Next marks our roll art drawings. You with the Washington Informer, you hear what the people are talking about. You have a television show, you hear what the people are talking about. So share with us your perspective of what are people talking about? What kind of reactions are you getting? And you're also plugged into the national press. See, we gotta remember, we have a national publisher, the National Black Publishers Association, right? It may not even be called black, but we have a National Publishers Association. So what are you hearing and how are you assessing the situation?
So, thank you very much, Dr. Daniels, and thank you. Everybody has their first. So my first, I want to say I'm happy to be in this house, which was the church that my father and stepmother belonged to. The church where my father was funeralized in 1994. And as I look at that woman who's looking over at us right now, Curdy Mae Turner, who when she passed left this church, I think if I'm not mistaken, $1 million to help to build this room that we're in right now. To me, it means what my daddy used to say all the time. If it is to be, it is up to me and no one can save us for us but us. And so we, when I think about, and I wanted to let you know, Hillary, I renewed my membership to NAACP a couple of weeks ago. I gotta pull the card out every now and then and let folks know. I got a bunch of people backing me up. But, for the last 3 or 4 years, I kept asking, is George Floyd dead? Next month marks the 5th anniversary of his murder. And once he died, the doors of opportunity opened, particularly for the Black press. And so while we're talking about DEI, we went through multicultural marketing, we've been through all the phases. So when they came up with DEI, I was putting on LinkedIn, what is DEI? And who are these gatekeepers that are really responsible for DEI? Because a lot of times we couldn't get through those DEI doors. And when you look at the Black press in general, and I'm gonna talk about the internal and then the external. But internally, at this juncture, when DEI has been pretty much abandoned, you look at how Black press is supported, funded. There are 2 pockets or 2 buckets. They're advertising buckets. There's the DEI, multicultural, whatever bucket, which would probably fit on this something. It might even be your shoe now. And then there's the general advertising budget, which is huge. We have to share those dollars. We meaning Black press, Hispanic press, women-owned press, LGBTQI, whatever press. We have to fight over the dollars that we share. We don't get those other dollars. And we saw that even in these elections. We looked at Black press got $2 million out of the billions that we spent on the elections. And it happened even in the Obama administration, same thing happened. So we don't get those dollars. And what little dollars you were getting, we're not getting them. So when someone asked me, Julianne, what was different last week than this week? When Wells Fargo says, we can't spend money with you right now because we don't know what's going on. We don't know what to do. That's a huge chunk of money that we've lost, right? And all of these companies that are affiliated with this man are pulling their dollars out of not only nonprofit organizations, not only the press, not only out of our schools. All of us are losing this source of revenue. And so when people say to me, Denise, if we ever needed the Black press, we need it now. No, the Black press needs you. We all need you, which is why I renewed my membership to the NAACP. Not a lot of money, but it's a little bit. So that's one thing. I mean, we are struggling and we are directly impacted. And when I talk to a publisher of a writer or somebody with Washington Post, they couldn't get it. They didn't understand how we survived. And so, I just wanted to share that part, but also, you know, in Trump's past administration, one of the things that I do, and anybody can do this, but I get the White House press releases. I read them every single day. And when I was looking at all these judicial appointments, I spent almost an hour, almost every day, going through to find out, are these Black judges? And when I realized none of them were Black judges, I started reaching out to some of my colleagues in quote unquote mainstream media, Black folks, to say, are you all following these appointments? Do you see what he's doing? I mean, it was like I was talking to an empty room. We wrote about it, but of course our voice is not as loud as others, you know, but we saw what was coming and where we are today. And so, yeah, I wonder if George Floyd is dead. George Floyd has finally died. He has died. He is buried and gone. And so, you know, I would just say, when I think about, or when I hear what's going on out there, it's fear, it's frustration, and it's whiplash. You know, because every day someone gets up and hears something that says, how is that going to impact me? Now, I think, and I keep saying boots on the ground, and I'm not talking about the fans, even though we all probably need to pull out our fans, it's getting hot here. But I don't think a lot of people on the ground in neighborhoods, in my neighborhood, if I were to go out and ask people, which I have, you know, what do you think about what's happening? Man, I just know, you know, I'm just trying to find me a job. You know, I'm just trying to make sure I get my rent paid. There may not be the connection yet to what's coming that's impacting the lives of people today. I just don't think we are talking about it on the ground in our neighborhoods. We know what the talking heads are saying. The people who are ahead of these organizations. We know what you all are saying. But that's not trickling down. And people have cut off television. They've cut off newspapers. You know, they're not interested. They don't want to hear this bad news. And so how we prepare our communities for what's happening. I have to look at that woman back there and say, I hope we have some more Curdy Turners in our village. And I appreciate what you're saying, because we have to use the cultural and historical lessons that we've always had to figure out how do we get through this. We will get through this. We will. But, you know, it made me, and Julian, I thought about it when you talked about Target. I don't know about y'all, but I'm going to go home and clean out my closet. I got so much stuff in there that I do not wear anymore. And I think we should open up a clothes closet someplace. We ought to take all the stuff we got that we don't use and collectively make it available. We don't need new clothes. We do not need new clothes. We don't need new shoes. Might be a haircut or something, but you know, we got trees, you know, so I guess where I'm ending here is to say, as Reverend Jackson used to say, we gotta keep hope alive. We cannot give up hope. And we gotta know what we've got within our communities that we can use to save ourselves. And Curdy, maybe Turner, Miss Turner, if you got another $1 million out there, we need it. So that's
All right, thank you very much. We want to, and by the way, to the people in the back, I asked them to be a microphone up here in the middle with a mic right here. Please accommodate me, or however we can do it. We want a microphone right up here in the front so people can come to the microphone. So rather than have a complete second round, because we're up against the clock, what I want to do is focus on what Denise just talked about. I was going to do that anyway. And just some thoughts on this, because at the end of the day, and Joe Madison used to talk about this, he had this phrase, we need to be able to talk about it in a way, write down where the ghost can get it. Because at the end of the day, and you know, I had an interesting conversation on WPFW today, and there was a young man, and you know, he's a revolutionary, and that's a good thing. I'm a revolutionary too. An aging one to be sure, but I'm a revolutionary, right? And we were talking about these issues And I was trying to talk about how you navigate the system. And I used a quote from Karenga to say that. Karenga says, we are realistic, but as for reality, we have come to change. That is a very profound statement. Because what it says is we have to figure out, we got our eyes on the prize, but it ain't like you can just rush straight up in there. You got to figure out how to navigate the terrain that you're in. We have people, Sister Denise, who have no clue about what the judiciary means. I have been prophesying for years that we were in for a Plessy versus Ferguson movement because those on the right within the empire, I'll use that language, because the empire has two wings. One of those wings functions differently than the other wing within the capitalist empire. And they were systematically putting in place judges at all levels that would sanctify and give judicial sanction to their retrograde, right-wing, anti-Black, anti-racist agenda. So we came down to the Clinton election and, for whatever she did and didn't do and so forth, the B and this and so forth and so on. The one thing we know is when you look at judges that make critical decisions like those are being now, we hope that they will do the right thing here and there. We know that there would have been different kinds of judges. Doesn't mean you love her. This is not about love or hate in some sort of that way, but it means about an agenda. So the question is, how do we get through? How do we get, because the margins were, and what the brother said on the radio was, the vast majority of Black people have abandoned the Democratic Party. Well, that's not true. Overwhelmingly, the vast majority of people who vote in the Black community vote for the Democratic Party. And that's millions. In fact, our voting percentage, because of the work that many of you have done, is higher. The problem is it could be higher. And then there's in the margin, so there's a dip, like we saw, that dip can be devastating, right? But how do we, because we all heard, we were all trying to sell it and so forth, people say, hey, Barbara said, hey, I ain't gonna do it that. They're the same people, everything's the same, no matter who's in office. But everything you said on the stage is that it is consequential. It does matter. So I don't know, let's talk for a few minutes before we get to our audience about what do we say? How do we break through in terms of the discussion with our folks on the ground who are in the neighborhoods and so forth? And many of us, and some of this because they are suffering. They are suffering. How do we get through? Who wants to take it on? Dr. J, and then we'll go to you, Deidre. Well, you can take this. All of us supposed to work. I don't know if it's not. Dr. Marble, yes.
I'm thinking a piece now about Saturday schools. Back in the day, we did Saturday schools.
Yes.
Okay, but what I'm saying is, I want us to consider the concept of Saturday schools. That in the 70s, of course, back in the day, we would get together on Saturday, we all read the same thing and learn some of the same things. Charles Ogletree used to do a Saturday school at Harvard, where he had law students and others and do Saturday schools. The thing is, our kids are not going to learn our history from the devil, because the devil is going to distort the history. Right. I remember a piece that someone in Time magazine did to talk about happy slaves. Happy slaves. What a concept. And as you see them going to our museum systematically, trying to take things out of the museum. I was over at our museum, the Blacksonian, on Tuesday having lunch with a sister, and someone just found at the table and was talking about taking the down floor out. Maybe the ground floor is where they have the slave cabins, all of that. So not to go on too long, but simply to say that we have to figure out ways to get together and teach our history. Now, this is not a huge pop thing, but in a way, it's a brain shift. So I'm going to be asking, I've been writing this piece because I want Pastor Lamar to consider doing this at Metropolitan. I'm going to send you the piece, so maybe y'all can do it here. But we need to have our young people and our elders, because the other part of the Saturday school movement, as I conceive it, is that it would also be intergenerational. So that we can hear from some of the people who long distance runner over here, who I don't know how old you are, 80-something.
I'm 38 years old.
38, yeah. Well, you know, that's what Ronald Clinton used to say. She says, age ain't nothing but a number. So I'm gonna pick mine. No, see, I had a living miracle. Somebody should have shot my behind a long time ago. So, you know, I'm 71 and I claim every moment of it. But the Saturday school concept is for us to talk to each other, to talk to our young people. And from there, I think beautiful public policy will emerge.
Teacher can get with them that Denise has the last word before we go to the audience. So anyone from the audience who would like to pose a recommendation or have a short statement, not a oration. Come to this mic. Do you have the mic set up? Okay.
Yeah, the mic set up.
Go right ahead.
All right, and I'll just say briefly, I mean, you know, I think there's always more that we can do, you know, people on the stage. So I do think, you know, most of us on stage are focused on trying to reach out to communities. You know, I thought you brought up a very good point, though. If you're talking about Democratic Party and elected officials or, you know, big campaigns, like if they're so dependent on the Black vote, but they can't spend money on the Black press, or they feel like we have to pivot because we can't, you know, we can't have Black policy. We have to have American policy, but Black people really need to come out. That's a problem, you know, and you're kind of reaping what you sow. So I think part of what we do, what some of us on stage do, who engage, you know, political leaders, is talk to them about, well, how are you going to really reach out and stand? Because it's crazy. Like, how can you demand? You get 80% of our vote every time, but we didn't do enough. Like, that's crazy, you know. So that's what I'm kind of reframe the question today. But I'll pass it on to whoever did that.
I just wanted to ask you, Julian, when you put that article together, that you take a look at what's going on in Florida, because the Freedom Schools have been reintroduced down there, and the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, ASALH, that is their big agenda item right now, is establishing Freedom Schools in response to this DEI. The other thing I will say is that I mentioned earlier, I do pull press releases. I go to the White House website, media site every day. And so today I read, or yesterday or the day before, the president issued, I don't know the number of the executive order, but it's the Executive White House Initiative to promote excellence and innovation at historically Black colleges and universities. Check it out.
Just wanted to respond to what Dr. Muhammad was saying, I think arms with Denise over there, because we have been looking at what churches in Florida have been forced to do with these Saturday schools. And we're actually planning to do that here at Shiloh, a 6-month curriculum based on certain topics, beginning with the Emancipation Proclamation, 13, 14, and 15 amendments, and reaching to our pews because we have people who can teach it. Like Elaine Jones, a former head of the Legal Defense Fund, Dr. Bowers, who's at UDC. And we want to make it generational so that families can come together, they can go home together and talk about it. And then to also assign books, which we believe should be in every Black home as part of the curriculum for raising kids and for raising grandkids. But it means nothing, as Dr. Malcolm knows, if only Shiloh is doing it. We don't share it and share the model with others. But I don't believe that it can, it should, and it will catch fire.
Yes, no.
And I hope y'all all get to know Jan, right? As many of you may not know Jessica Ann Mitchell, but you heard what she has to say in her organization. Why I've been advocating, bringing some more voices into this conversation with our legacy organizations and so forth. There's a rich amount of resources out here we need. So go right ahead.
Sure, so I just wanted to also plug that there's an amazing woman out of Tulsa, Oklahoma, who's actually descendant of survivors of the Tulsa Race Massacre named Chrissy. She has a program called Black History Saturdays, and that would be something that you could possibly connect with and model after. At National Black Cultural Information Trust, we have a program called Protect Black History. You can go to protectblackhistory.org, and we supply books for those types of things. We have, so communities, churches, whoever can reach out to us, and then we would supply books. We just came back from Baltimore yesterday, giving over 300 books to a event for Black girls in middle school and high school in Baltimore. So just to let y'all know that that resource is here.
Okay, all right, let's go. My brother, I think you were first. Is anybody else that's lined up? And you got 3 minutes.
Okay, I got 3 minutes. Great. Listen, the last subject matter we talked about Saturday school, I think that's an excellent idea. Except, I think that we need to. Oh, okay, very good. One of the things that really needs to be done though is that we need to have some intelligentsia, the research, the reasoning that's going on, instead of just doing Black history. Black history is fine, but ever since World War II, it's always been intelligence. Intelligence is what won World War II. Intelligence and manipulation of intelligence is what our problem is, along with racism. And we are not addressing that. I think there are a couple of things here. There's, for instance, there are 2 books that everybody should be aware of. Should read. One of them is Democracy and Change, does that ring a bell? And Shock Doctrine, the Shock Doctrine. Those 2 books that detail exactly what's going on now, how we got in power. It has been a long, century-long conspiracy of getting judges in position, getting lawyers in positions to do just what Trump is doing now. That's documented. There's also been a psychological, experiments done in the 1950s and 60s in trying to upset people so they can be manipulated into fascist fascist countries. This happened in South America, along with the University of Cleveland and people like that. And with some elected officials were involved in 60s and 70s. So I acknowledge everybody here. Please read those 2 books and you get a big understanding, because the question of why is all this chaos? Why is he sowing all this chaos? It's not that he's stupid in that sense, but he is. And it's not really him, because he's not that smart. What's really happening is that this is a long-term plan that's coming to fruition and you're seeing it. So this is chaos. It's not just because they're stupid. Don't let them hide behind stupid thing. That's one of the CIA things. Say, well, we didn't know it. That's a CIA trick. So you're saying, well, he's just stupid. That's why you do it. No, he's not stupid. This chaos is designed specifically for a very specific purpose. And as I was pointing out. So one of the things that I would really like to know, well, not to know, like to see, is that on the Saturday schools, we need to start to, when you use the word indoctrinating our kids into an analysis of the system that causes this problem. We have to talk about capitalism and why it does what it does. I mean, there's white racism and there's white craziness too, but capitalism makes people do things within a certain parameters. So we need to get this word into our community. Capitalism really is the underlying grid of racism. And we're not talking about that, we just talk about the effects of the racist effects that happen every day that you all got to be dealing with. But there's a reason, and that's why you got to say, who struck Young and why did they do it? That's really important.
I thank you very kindly. Anybody else in the audience come up, and I'm going to call on Tyrone Parker. You got something to say in this meeting. You know that. And the reason I'm going to call on Tyrone Parker is because
anybody can see those 2 books. I do have some copies of it, and you can get it online for like $4 or $5 used.
But the reason I'm going to call on Tyrone Parker is because we have lots of people who are formerly incarcerated, who used to be called convicts and all kinds of things, but the power of a constituency, that terminology got turned around being formerly incarcerated and returning citizens. But there are people who are formerly incarcerated. There are people, I happen to think that one of the most important hubs in our community still is the barbershop and the beauty salon. Because you go to the beauty salon and you hear, and I interact with my barber and I say, you're a resource person. That's a sounding board. You go into that barbershop and you hear what people are saying, and our own families, by the way. And I be talking stuff, I get a family call, they say, well, they raise issues, right? And we have to be able to address those issues because, again, as I'm going to say, it's the margins. It's the margins. Most Black people will continue to vote. Now, let me dip a little bit here and there, but the assignment we have, voting is a part of it, it's on the margin. Yes, sir.
All right. First of all, I'm the one to thank all of you for coming together, even for having this forum in the community. We've been talking, about what we can do and everything. The whole concept of these Saturday schools, we've talked about. I'm glad to see them coming to fruition. So one of the things, basically, when this whole thing is rolling about the schools, they're gonna come after them. We're gonna need us to wake up our own community, to be there to protect what we do as it relates. We talk about education, they're coming in. Okay. If the other thing that we gotta do is that we really have to make that effort to reach out to these young people. Our soldiers are getting killed, they're killing each other every day. And we don't seem to be addressing it in any cohesive manner. Because if we don't do that, you know, that's the foundation of whatever we do as a movement. You don't have to have everybody at first, but when fire starts, you're gonna need more. And we really need to come out and make that effort. You know, I know a lot of people are scared, but we gotta do it. If we don't do it, you know, I don't think, you know, we're not gonna make this progress. I think we can make it through this period with Trump, but we gotta really work on establishing our own foundation. I've been here since '72. I grew up in Newark, New Jersey, right, my brother? And I've seen a whole lot of stuff from Los Angeles to here, you know, and in the South. And a lot of people that say, you know, well, what we have accomplished? We've accomplished a heck of a lot over time. And we take a lot of things for granted. We've got to stop doing that and realize that we have made progress. Every mayor in this city, except for one, and I won't mention his name, has tried their best to keep us on track as such. DC is not a state. DC has oversight for the federal government. So their margin for error is really narrow and stuff. So we gotta get out and support our leadership because we are the ones who can push them in the right direction as it relates to what we need to do. And I think they are doing what they can within the parameters of what they're working with and stuff. But we gotta establish some type of base with our own people. And that's why there's a lot of disrespect towards us as a people.
All right, thank you very much. Yes, sir. And there's some sisters in the audience who want to speak. The brothers always seem to get up first, but we come on, man. You know, sisters are women are welcome. Grab the microphone. Yes, sir.
Saturday school is good. But I want to talk about emergency preparedness before it happened to us.
Okay.
And that is about food, storing water, and storing anything that you can survive, especially if you have family and children, where you don't have to go out on the street. If something do go down for us, we can fight and still have food and stuff in the house, and you have to travel for the store. That's all I have to say.
Thank you so much. That's a very important component. And there are people in the Black community. That's why the aggregation of these resources is important. I know within the Black Family Summit, which has been now an independent division of the Institute of the Black for the 21st Century, social workers, and psychiatrists, administrators of Black Child, they've created a whole pattern of that response. One of the problems is getting funded was a problem, but then we self-funded and did whatever we could along the side. But that is a critical part of the overall equation.
Thank you, Dr. Daniels, for hosting this very important conversation. I just wanted to thank all of the panelists for your insights. This is a very informative program. But I wanted to push back on the idea that we don't need Black policy. We absolutely need Black policy. This is a critical moment in the history of our people in this country. We're provided with the opportunity to reignite an internal conversation. And that internal conversation needs to talk about who we are, how we self-define. And then the Black policy is our self-determination manifesto. Who we are, where we're going, where we want to go, who we want to be, what our goals are. And then out of our Black policy, we can send some offshoots to the Congress. But if we haven't learned by now that the United States government is not going to look out for our interests first, then we're in a lot worse trouble than whatever Donald Trump presents. So we've got to get to the point where we have our agenda. We're clear and we have the connections with each other so that as our agenda needs updating, we can have those conversations with each other. And our Black policy flows out of that. And then out of that Black policy, we can send messages to Wall Street. We can send messages to the Congress. We can send messages to the United Nations or wherever else we need to send it. But we got to be clear that we have a distinct self-interest. It is distinct, perhaps often compatible with the interests of this country. But we can't keep being the only people who believe in America more than any other American. It is what has gotten us in this situation now. And I just want to reiterate what the brother said about preparedness. We don't even have to be like cataclysmic or hyperbolic about preparedness. We already know when America has a cold, we get pneumonia. And we know that Donald Trump, how did Kanye say when he was still saying? Donald Trump don't care about Black people, right? We know that. So if there is another pandemic, if there is a terrible tornado, if there is some other natural disaster or a political disaster, we need to be prepared as a people to take care of ourselves first. And we're not there now. And we've had too many examples over the last 15 or 20 years about how disaster strikes and we're not ready. So that's my feedback. I think this is a wonderful opportunity, and I want to encourage all of us to make the connections with each other, and let's jumpstart the conversation.
All right, Brother Tyrone, I'll give you the last word.
It's extraordinary. We've had a very rich conversation, and all of it has made a strong contribution to what our direction would be. I think from my perspective, I look at it, we've got to become more inclusive of individuals that traditionally have felt that they've been left out. Those individuals that's on the street corner, those individuals that don't feel like they've had a part of this. We got to create means to better connect with that population. As I heard Denise said, how can the media, the Black media, be only given a small percentage to be able to reach our communities in the whole? I mean, some of this is just not right. But also, as I heard the young lady make mention of, we got to become far more creative in regards to how we are approaching and working the things that we do. Because we can make something out of nothing. These times are not extraordinarily new for us. We've seen them before. But with the Spirit of God, we were here again. But please don't forget those who are being left out of this equation. Because they are the natural resources for the transformational change that we are looking for. Thank you, sir.
All right. What we're gonna do is we got the one compelling idea. We talked about the one compelling idea, no more than a minute. And we need a functioning mic. This is functioning now. Which one of the mics is functioning? All right, we'll start with you. And let's start with Kamala and just got this way then pass the mic. One idea.
Well, first, let me say that until you understand the institution of white supremacy, what it is, and how it works, everything else you think you understand will only confuse you. Dr. Francis Cress Wilson via Mr. Millie Fuller. And to see where I think it was Jenny Vance just monetized having verse, just reiterates what Dr. Wilson was teaching. And unfortunately, she was fired from a Black institution for teaching her.
So the one compelling idea is to understand the nature of white supremacy. Next.
That was not my statement.
I don't get it. The one compelling idea.
That was not called to action there, brother.
I'm gonna do the call to action.
So my one compelling statement is that we utilize our internal resources, utilize our internal knowledge systems. We had talked about earlier how to reach people. We've been dealing with a lot of myths and disinformation meant to really stifle, make Black voter suppression and get people to feel hopelessness. And so we need to recognize these mechanisms at hand and come together with our own internal and cultural values and knowledge systems as a means to reach to the different people that are not traditionally being reached.
Right.
Kamon, rather than study white supremacy, I want to exercise Black power. And so with that, I would suggest that everyone take time. We got websites. Go to NAACP's website. Go to the Urban League's website. Go to the Joint Center's website. Go to the website of our host here today. Go to our local websites. There's information out there that we need to be equipped with. Go to the Congressional Black Caucus website, which I found they are taking every one of Trump's executive orders and dissecting it and saying, how is this impacting Black America? That information will give you power, and that's the power we need to use against white supremacy.
Exercise Black power.
My intervention is one, when I think about what Trump did after he lost that election, the first one, they went to the Heritage Foundation, and that's where they started to craft the thing called Project 2025. And basically, they've been working on that for like years. And so when you see the, well, it's so disjointed, is because Trump got it. Hey, oh, we're gonna do this here. Boom. And so I would think another side of what we ought to be doing, the next couple of years is gonna be rough. We ought to get the Joint Center and other think tanks, get the CDC, get the Black leadership, crafting what the next iteration of the US government is gonna look like. But if we don't do any thinking to go forward, I'm convinced that we'll be in the same place, crying and complaining, agonizing, not organizing.
All right.
Yeah, and I was thinking exactly along the same lines, and I'll just say that I will commit to Joint Center. It doesn't make sense that we don't have a 1,000-page Black policy agenda at the federal level, then another 1,000-page at the state, then another 1,000-page at the city. And I know Joint Center's been around since 1970, doing policy analysis. Urban League's been around, NAACP, but I've also been in these organizations, and we're so oftentimes reinventing our policy. We throw away the past instead of building off it. Project 2025 was based off Heritage Foundations, I forget what it was initially called, I think in 1980. They've been doing it, and they've been at building off of that year after year after year. This is something that I want to commit Joint Center to work with other institutions. We're doing an early draft of this with the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation. That'll be coming out in May, but I want to work with, all institutions that are doing serious analysis around Black policy and, and start building this up.
Black paper. Black paper for Black power, all right? Good.
If we're putting one piece together, that piece has to be real constitutional equity and equality for all Americans. What that means is that for some reason it's an afterthought that every single American, regardless of race, gender, ethnicity, points of national origin and other differences, for some reason or another, have to go through an additional process to actually register to vote. Put it in these terms. We still have a system in which we actually register every person in our country at the time they hit their 18th birthday. They are registered for the draft. If we can register from the draft, should they not also be registered for something that actually gives them the empowerment to decide at what point the country would go to war, at what point the country would utilize resources, taking them away from communities and putting them in other places? So in essence, the bottom line is that major piece needs to be to make sure we fix the Voting Rights Act so it continues to provide the proven provisions that allow every American to be able to cast that unfettered vote, in addition, have that vote counted to make sure, again, our voices are heard, our problems can be addressed, and we can move forward as that Constitution promises.
Universal permanent registration.
Well, I don't know if it's because I'm sitting next to a preacher or we're in a church, but my final word is God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. It's important that we tap into that power and understand what's in our DNA. We are not a fearful people. We are a people that have withstood more than most could even imagine, the unfathomable, and we're still here. And so we have everything that we need within us. We have the creativity, we have everything that we need within us to educate ourselves, to organize ourselves, to have the strategy to move our people forward. So tap into that.
Wait, you're not. You're not.
I think we're on a holy ground tonight, not because of where we are, but because of who we are and what we still believe. I read a quote from late Pope Francis this week that said sometimes Jesus is not going to adore the church from the inside, wanting to get out. And so it's in that vein that I think that places like Shiloh and other churches ought to go back into the community and not with what they want them to have, but to connect, to unite, and help people outside of these walls to be protected. And so it's not enough to have a Saturday school for those youth who come through these doors, those few, but to make sure that the youth in the community can come, can learn, can eat, and know there's a safe space.
Church at the center.
Amen, and a woman, and I share. Okay, I can do, it's 3 ideas, but I'm gonna put it in 1 minute.
One idea, and I can't shut them down unless you agree.
If I do it in a minute.
One idea, one compelling idea. I'm sorry, one compelling idea.
Okay, keep your money in your pocket. My one compelling idea. I mean, we are consumers. We spend our money, we are funding our own oppression. If you choose to walk into Target, you choose to fund your oppression. If you choose to go to some of these other places, you choose to fund your oppression. So what we need to do is keep our money in our pockets and teach our young people to do that as well. Because young people become I remember the phrase everybody has. Yeah. Everybody has a little black dress. I remember back in the day, I wrote an article about it saying, no, everybody does it. Some people don't have no dresses at all. And you basically are teaching people how to consume. Everybody has an iPhone. No, everybody does not, and everybody cannot afford one. So when I say keep your money in your pocket, these little babies here, gorgeous young ladies, I hope their mom and daddy, I don't know who their mom and daddy is, but they're cute as they want to be. Well, they are cute as they want to be. But anyway, they need to understand money. They need to understand that you don't have to have everything because somebody else has it. Our young people get so addicted, so keep your money in your pocket. Let's get back to this one. Let's get back to this one. Let's get another round of applause for the historic Shiloh Baptist Church, guys. And give yourself a big round of applause for sticking it out, because you stayed here. Jesus Christ said that there's a few, but the few became a multitude. Y'all hung in here, and it was a quality conversation, wasn't it? This was a seriously quality conversation. So let me close out with a few thoughts, if you will. And I close out, and I've been around a little while. I'm 38 years old, like I said. Actually, my birthday is tomorrow. Flip the number. Tomorrow's my birthday. Flip the number. And I think let me start by saying that on May 19th, it is the centennial of El Hajj Malik El Shabazz, our shining black prince, Malcolm X. His 100th birthday. And there's a lot to be learned from El Hajj Malik El Shabazz. In fact, go back and read, and I don't normally hear the message from the grassroots, but the ballot or the bullet. Very, very important. And we're on a mission, by the way, because I'm multitasking and saying no, because we are, and Dr. Malvo and Dr. Kimona is going with us as well. Because on the 14th through the 18th, we're leading by the Institute of the Black World 21st Century, a pilgrimage of history and hope to Grenada to uplift the life and legacy of Louise Langdon Little, the mother of El Hajj Malik El Shabazz, who was born in Grenada. We're going to raise her up. She was not just his mother, which is important in and of itself. She was an activist before she left Grenada. He went on to become a leading figure in the Universal Negro Improvement Association. So she wasn't on the sidelines. She was helping to shape one of the greatest
freedom fighters we've ever known. So I just wanted to just share that bit of information. The other thing that's so important about this meeting is that, that's why the collective wisdom. It's interesting, I had a conversation with Deacon Diana right here. We came, I'm getting everything lined up for the meeting and all that, and this beautiful African woman comes out with beautiful hair and everything. We get to talking. And I said to her, one of the things that I have been advocating for a long time inside the church, in terms of passing on cross-generational knowledge, is that we have the young people interview and record the stories of our elders. Because what happens is, unlike some communities, there was so much pain in the mob, or so much pain in the enslavement process that our mothers and fathers didn't want to talk about it. The notion of Sankofa is the way forward is to go back. You must always remember, as Anthem-Muhammad said, where we came from and honor the bridges that brought us over. So I was listening to this wonderful woman and her story and some of the things she was talking about, where she came from. This is like serious stuff in terms of the accomplishments of our people that in churches everywhere. So we need to that's a nice little part of maybe the Saturday schools. Not a new idea, of course, that. The Diane Nash and so forth, Snick and all of them, beginning in Nashville, wherever it was. And we certainly did some of that in the 60s and 70s, after school programs, as well as Saturday school programs, because we have this enormous access in our community. We have retired teachers who can therefore will extend their lives because they will have a purpose, sharing and teaching a new generation. That's one other thing, and this is not what I was going to talk about, but I have also laid this out many, many times. I've argued, Reverend Bowen, that every church in the Black community should take at least its precinct. Maybe it's just a neighborhood, but at least its precinct. And if you took a precinct and said, this is going to be our committed way of reaching out to touch somebody, then you go survey, and if you survey the neighborhood, what's your answers? Who are you? We're from Shiloh Baptist Church. Glad to meet you. Who are you? Just to touch people. Because one of the things we're finding out, even young people are finding out now, that the internet may be fine, but there's something about human beings, the capacity to touch and feel, that's important. Something about human beings yearn to have that interaction with each other. So then you do a survey in the community. Find out what people's needs are. Could be food and clothing, kind of things you're talking about, because Lord knows we got more than we need. We tend to beg for what we need and pay for what we want. Somebody once said. And then as you cultivate those relationships, then those are potential activists and potential voters. And by the way, members. Because they will come to join the church. Why? Because somebody reached out and touched them and brought them in. And then on election day, because my whole thing is if we can register 90% of Black people in America and on election day get 90% of that 90% to turn out, we will exercise power disproportionate to our numbers. So every church did that. That's a small thing. That's not a huge thing in terms of reaching out and moving in the community. So there are these kind of things that I've talked about for many, 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 many years. But I want to close on quickly tonight. There was a series of things because on November 14th, as some of you recall, I issued certain calls and challenges and so forth. So, since I'm 38, nobody wants to pay me much attention. That's an old G out here running his mouth. Probably the last time I do this because I'd rather be on the panel. Because this place should be packed. So if me convening it is the reasons why it's packed, I'll sit on the panel, somebody else can call. Because in the spirit of Ujima, if every organization has seriously, all of us sort of organized to bring out our flock, the place would be full. Right. But what we tend to do is not that. So we hold our list and so forth. And, I'm going to do it because I'm going to build this sometime. I know you didn't. But that's okay. I understand that. But these kind of conversations need to be had. We need to be gathering with each other. and breaking bread with each other. Somebody you were saying, and building those relationships, rebuilding those relationships in our community. So I talked about several things, if you will. Because I want to talk about resistance and transformation. Now, Bernie Sanders and AOC are out there, they're drawing huge crowds. Huge crowds. They're sending a signal to the Democratic Party, one of the ways that it might move forward. There's only one problem. The Democratic Party has got to understand, it was mentioned several times on the stage, that race matters. W.B. Du Bois said that the problem of the 20th century will be the color line. It has not yet been relinquished. The problem of the 21st century is still the color line. We still have white workers who suffer. You know, those from you down south, my mother probably used to talk about, at least my father from down south said, the people next door were white people, they were poor as church mice. Oh. And yet they could not see the necessity of black and white unite and fight. Now that's not everybody, because we've always had, a segment of white progressives that have allied with us. So we don't want to not dismiss that. But far too many times, the real secret, one of the real tragedies of American history is racism has been used as a strategy to divide and exploit. So all of the programs, even some of the programs that Biden put together that help workers that are generating jobs, they still voted against Biden. Because the problem is us. They don't want us here. They don't want brown people here. They want people who are other here. They still want us to somehow be a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant nation based on white supremacy. And so we have to realize that, and we have to come to grips with that. Charity begins at home and spread abroad. We are not opposed to anybody. At our best, the ancient notion of justice is who we are about. We have always fought for other people. We should never relinquish that. But charity begins at home and spreads abroad, not the other way around, right? So, I was fantasizing a little bit. I said, well, I think Barbara and Bernie should hit the road together. What about William Barbara and Bernie Sanders doing the so that'd be a slightly different proposition. I mean, people underestimate the genius of Reverend Jesse Lewis Jackson. One of the great, he flawed, got problems. I love him, he's my brother. He said, not a perfect servant, but brilliant. In the city, Mary.
Come on, man.
The mayor of the city. The Secretary of Agriculture from Texas, whose name was Hightower. Jesse Jackson brings them together. The white farmer and the urban mayor. We put them together to talk about what? To now make common ground. To try to get them to see that they had common interests. We don't have politicians doing that anymore. We miss the genius of President Jesse Lewis Jackson. But the main point is to understand that race matters. The race is the bottom of all of this. We also understand that at the end of the day, what is really going to transform America is Black resistance. We are the ones. People said, and I heard you, Brother Deidre, say, why should we? Well, you go back and read the Gary National Black Political Convention's preamble. He said, we are at the forefront because we are among those who are the most oppressed within society, include our Native brothers and sisters in that you have your country. So we should forge to the forefront. And in that regard, what I said on November 14th is beginning to percolate. Dr. J hit it on the nose. Because we understand that in this capitalist political economy, it is the love of money more than anything else. I love what you said, Sister Denise. I remember being an activist in Youngstown, Ohio, those 38 years ago. We found out Organization Freedom Incorporated, the first thing we did. We all bought war suits. The denim jeans and denim jackets, we stripped off that other stuff. What were we trying to say about people? We don't need all that stuff. You look at Muhammad Gandhi. You first see Gandhi. You see him as a barrister in South Africa. He's all suited up and all tied up. One of the greatest apostles of nonviolence ever. Muhammad Gandhi was all tied up as a forest and a lawyer in South Africa. Because people were oppressed. Check out what he did. People don't understand what he did. One of the first things he did was what? He stripped off the suit. He went to the spinning wheel. What was he saying? Where we are being oppressed by a nation built on consumerism, we are no longer going to wear those suits and ties anymore. We'll take the spinning wheel because we can be self-reliant. Jesus and Muhammad Khan. And so it's important for us to give up some of that commercialism. I've said for years and years and years, if we declared during the Xmas season, not the Christmas season, the Xmas season, which is the commercial corruption of Christmas, we ain't buying nothing. I mean, they would come and ask us how much reparations we needed immediately. Because we were praying that it would come coming down. And so I'm delighted, yes, that the Urban League had a roundtable early on saying, we're going to check out this DUI thing, what's happening, and try to figure out some guidelines. Nan got on board and talked about some guidelines. And also there was a Black Friday was declared, that's the white guy out of Chicago who led that piece. Shockingly. But when my daughter called me and said, hey, it's my meeting, you ain't supposed to be going to Target. Oh, that's what it goes to. And do administrative. But you need that mass understanding. Not us, we're activists and organizers. We can't have an incestuous conversation with ourselves. We have to broaden the conversation. And we are delighted. There is an art and science to it. Martin Luther King on that speech at the mountaintop, he talked about it. He devoted a whole section of that speech talking about economic sanctions. But you can't boycott everything at the same time. There's an art and science to it. And so Reverend Jamal Bryant has decided to target. And as he's targeting, they're changing. And here's the other thing that you got to come to understand. We don't have to, I hope we get 100%. But Dr. Malvo, there's such a thing as profit margins, right? So all I got to do is what? I just got to tab up a little bit of that profit margin. Just enough. And they will come begging, please. Can I meet with the Reverend? Can I meet with it? What is it you need? And we have to exercise that power. And it's a weapon. But in this scenario where we don't control the House and the Senate and all that, they say, what must we do? Well, we have the ability to withhold our rewards and use it as a weapon in the Black freedom struggle. And that's beginning to happen. It's beginning to permeate. Which leads to my next point. Is we can never OP our blackness. We can never OP our blackness. I call for a cultural revolution, not my term, Dr. Ramona Eatland's term. Some of y'all know Dr. Ramona. She would always talk about this cultural revolution. And if people want to talk about capitalism, yeah, that's an important piece. We need to deal with that. If you practice the Nguzo Saba, you have begun to deal with capitalism. Because the Nguzo Saba, Ujamaa and Ujima is an anesthetic. It's against the whole notion of me, myself, and I. It talks about we, us, and I. The African worldview is essentially a socialist worldview, if you want to put it in those terms. It's our worldview. We built it from our thing. We didn't get Marx or Lenin or anybody else to teach us that. It's already here in our own experience. That's what it means to be African-centered. And so we use that tool, we can be successful. So we need that cultural revolution to move forward. And this moving forward, in some ways, Pastor Michael McBride, who could not be here tonight, Melanie Campbell, who was not here tonight, and Siobhan, Arlene, Bradley, some of them are right now in Atlanta, getting ready to launch a multi-city tour. I think it's called a Black People's. Yeah, and it's moving, right? So that's moving, right? They're trying to gather the people, and they're meeting the people. That's the kind of things that we need. I reached out to some hip hop artists. Some of you know Paradise Gray, founder of X-Clan, and Professor Griff. He said, "Yeah, we down. We're willing to meet with the young people. We're willing to use our skill. I don't know how to rap. I don't know how, but I know that that medium has swept the world. I know that if you're talking about getting where the girls can get it, we need to communicate through that." They said, we are ready to fight the power again. So that's a positive development that we're looking at. I also want everybody to be aware of Democrats, Republicans, and all of that, but we need third force. We need an option. And I think that option is the Working Families Party. If you've not heard about it, study it. When Brother Cong refers to the mayor of Chicago, the mayor of Chicago is a member of the Working Families Party. They're electing people all across the country. They are pragmatic progressives. They got some Congress people. They got a number of people they're electing all across the country. Look at the Working Families Party. I'm hoping we can help put about the Working Families Party right here in DC. But the other thing is the question that we have to address, because the Democratic Party, I mean, this is like nonsense. We're not in the Democratic Party because we love the Democratic Party. It is only an instrument, it's only a tool that we're working through, right? So when we look at that, we have to raise our own money to support our own causes. And one of the things that we can do in terms of the cultural piece that we're talking about is to find a way to get to our artists and athletes and people who are signing these max contracts, 600 million, 500 million, all this, so that they can begin to contribute to a Black United Fund that's in our benefit. I'm almost done. So that becomes an important part of the political commission. There's been a call for perhaps a Gary National Black Political Convention. I was one of the key architects of the Gary National Black Convention in 1972. I have cut a video for that purpose so that people will understand what it was about, how it unfolded, and how it works and so forth, so that people can grab hold of that. I think we do need a Black political group, but you need to understand it wasn't just that people got together and threw it together. It was a comprehensive, pervasive process right down to the grassroots. That's why I support it, because it will be participatory and get people deeply engaged. I also believe that we need still a Black political forum and a Black summit. I've talked about that, and I will continue to talk to legacy organizations about the necessity of moving that project. We need to be better organized. Better organized. You hear it on the stage, but we need to be more explicitly organized. There needs to be a national summit that reflects Black leadership, and Black leadership, Black people ought to know that it exists so that we are aware of how things are going on. And then finally, we just have to be committed to waking up those rocks that Reverend Jesse Jackson talked about that just laying on the ground. It's great in terms of coming up with these concepts, right? The concept of David. People say, well, he's alive. Picked up those rocks on the ground. His point was, if he had not picked up the rocks, and if he had not slung the rocks, it would not have mattered. Goliath would have tried. He was talking about voters. We have more voting power than any group in this country, but we still have too many rocks just laying on the ground. And those are the rocks we got to reach. Those are those who don't know, who are feeling pain, who are feeling hurt, whatever. We got to enlist them. Because in a low voter participation environment, I've said over and over again, those who have power disproportionate to their numbers. And this is the final point. The final point is, it is those rocks. It is those rejected stones that will be the cornerstone of a new society in these United States of America. We are the ones who are going to create, not the same old. We're not interested in replicating the same old mess, the same old value systems. We will create that new society. We just need to believe in it, work in it, rise up to slay the immoral MAGA forces to create a rainbow society, a loving community, in the words of Dr. Martin Luther King. I close with what Marcus Garvey said: "Up, you mighty race. You can accomplish what you will. Up, you mighty race. You can accomplish what you will." By will, he means it's like faith. Sometimes you don't know how it's going to happen, but you can will it. You can achieve it because you believe. Up, you mighty race. Accomplish what you will. Thank you very kindly. We will now have to believe.
Thanks, Pastor. We thank Brother Daniels, every one of you all, and I'm just so proud of the representative for Al Green on Friday night. She stayed the entire time. And we should just give her a round of applause. And now let us leave this place strengthened by what we have heard here, determined to make the next 1,000 days outlast these first 100 days. Let us leave here giving glory to God, honor to our ancestors, and liberation to those yet. Let us leave here determined to continue to fight the good fight, to make change, to be different. For we know we stand upon the shoulders of generations who fought for many years. Go ye now in peace.
All right, let's do three hurrah, man. Let's do three hurrah days, all right? Everybody knows hurrah means in Swahili. Let's all put it together, all right? On 1, 2, 3, let's say hurrah day, hurrah day, hurrah day.